Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Binyamin, Tjong-Alvares with a top economic report. On today's program, African wildlife remains a controversial issue, and farmers make the desert bloom in Burkina Faso. First, the headlines. The European Central Bank preps for an imminent program of sovereign bond purchases with few options left to counter the risk of deflation. ECB President Mario Draghi said all members of the ECB's Governing Council are determined to fulfill our mandate, hinting that quantitative easing would happen soon. Price inflation fell to a negative 0.2% in December, well below the 2% target, raising fears of deflation, where falling prices lead to job losses and lower output. The ECB's Governing Council is expected to announce plans for a quantitative easing program at its meeting on January 22nd.
Any decision that the Governing Council takes is always both motivated and restricted by its mandate to ensure price stability. As in the past, the Governing Council will always comply with EU law.
India cut its key interest rate by 25 basis points to 7.75% at an impromptu meeting on Thursday in an effort to boost economic growth. The cut, which is expected to mark a steady easing of monetary policy over the coming year, boosted the benchmark Sensex up 2% in early trading. Wholesale price inflation has been at or close to zero for 2 months, and consumer price inflation stood at 5% in December. The decision may indicate the start of a loosening cycle, offering much-needed relief for India's indebted conglomerates. Brazilian auto workers are protesting the dismissal of employees in the struggling car industry, with 800 layoffs and another 1,300 planned. Car sales in Brazil, the world's fifth largest auto market, slid 7.15% last year to 3.5 million units, the sector's worst showing in 5 years. According to the Association of Manufacturers, 12,400 jobs were shed across the year. Thousands of workers from Volkswagen, Mercedes, and Ford plants blocked a Sao Paulo thoroughfare as they protested on Monday.
We have families to support. We are close to retirement and then they fire us. We can't find other work because of our age.
Egypt's stock market received a boost on Wednesday as it allowed trading in exchange-traded funds for the first time. The introduction of ETFs will also allow for the emergence of market makers in Egypt, potentially boosting liquidity. Stock market officials hope the funds will help boost the index back to where it was in 2008. The main stock index rose about 30% in 2014, and trading volumes have rebounded above levels seen in 2010.
The exchange-traded funds will buy from the 30 shares within the EGX 30 according to their relative value in the market. When it enters the market with a large capital to buy these shares, naturally the share prices will increase.
During the 1980s, more than half of Africa's elephants are estimated to have been wiped out, mostly by poachers hunting for ivory. Though a public awareness campaign has helped reverse the situation, the associated costs of saving African wildlife poses new challenges. More in this report by i24 News reporter Daniel Roth.
Vehicles letting elephants pass is a daily scene in Hwang. In this 15,000 square mile natural park in Zimbabwe, there are about 43,000 elephants. But their numbers are growing each year, and authorities are having trouble coping with the cost, so they are planning to sell some of them, taking them from their natural habitat.
As part of mitigation measures to try and control the elephant populations, we as parks, we are considering actually finding methods of reducing, like live sales. We're also considering translocation to other areas.
In all, some 60 elephants could be sent to France, the United Arab Emirates, and China. Their price, between $40,000 and $60,000 each.
We have actually received quite a number of offers from various countries, from Europe, from Asia.
The sale is, of course, opposed by animal rights associations. Meanwhile, the park says the revenue could be used to contribute to the functioning of Hoang. The annual cost of each animal is estimated at $500,000.
We have an estimated over 40,000 elephants within Hwange National Park, and this means that we require a lot of fuel to pump water here. As I've said, that we need 200 liters a day for each elephant, so you can multiply that by 45, which gives us 90,000 liters per day that we require just for elephants.
The elephants face myriad challenges in Zimbabwe, including ivory poachers who killed more than 300 last year, as well as this sale. The path forward for these great creatures is a hard one.
And we're joined now by Jordana Mosseri, Managing Director at investment management firm Clarity Capital, for a look at the top hedge fund industry trends in 2015. Ms. Mosseri, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So what is the situation in the hedge fund industry? I mean, are investors putting more assets into hedge funds, or is the industry on the decline following growing regulation?
Okay, so the hedge fund industry is always changing. We have always to be on top of the industry to really understand trends and movements. Despite all the history and the media stories with a negative aspect about hedge funds, actually the reality of the industry is pretty different. We see a lot of funds, smaller funds closing, but in total terms, we see the industry growing at high levels. We are estimating numbers as $3 trillion, of which 1/3 is coming from the top 25 managers. Okay. So high concentration on top names and growing industry despite the media. Of course, there is a lot of regulation since 2008. The regulators started to working hard to ensure the industry, especially the European regulation. We have a new regulation in Europe especially for U.S. funds marketing in Europe. We should know that the European market represented 25% of the U.S. Investments in the large U.S. hedge fund space. Today, it's much more difficult. There is a new regulation called IFMD, and so it's for the hedge fund coming from the U.S., it's forbidden to make marketing in the Europe. If not, they only have to be regulated. It would take some time.
How have hedge fund returns shifted in recent years?
The dispersion of the hedge fund industry is pretty diversified. We have hedge fund that did very well. We had fund that did less well. Depends on the strategy and depends on the manager as well. We had good numbers, of course, after 2008,
right.
and less interesting years in 2011 and probably also 2013 compared to the market. The hedge fund industry underperformed. We had great numbers, but when the Standard & Poor's is just going up so much, you should expect skilled manager to perform more. However, we always have to remember that hedge funds are hedging, meaning they are reducing the risk on the portfolio, and they are performing better in more difficult scenarios.
What investment strategies are attracting the most attention as we start 2015?
Okay, great question. This is the question, actually. We see that the more interesting strategies are relative value, strategies that have less exposure to the market, both in the fixed income and equity. We don't know exactly what will happen. We really saw in the second part of 2014 a lot of noise in the market. Finally, after many, many years of up markets, we saw energy going down. So all the strategies that are less correlated to the market, that are able to deliver positive return on all kinds of market conditions, which are investing both in equity or fixed income, very tactical oriented, very trading oriented, very liquid.
Okay. Well, Jordana Mosseri, Managing Director of Clarity Capital, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
In Burkina Faso, where once was stony semi-wasteland, are now verdant crop fields rescued from relentless desertification by a simple farming technique largely spread by word of mouth. Here's the story.
This was once a stony wasteland, but over the past 30 years, farmers in Burkina Faso have used simple techniques to beat back the desert so crops can thrive. In the small hamlet of Rim, near the border with Mali, farmers used the zai, or stone contour method, to rehabilitate depleted soil.
It was a question of using stones to make small barriers, which form a cordon, slowing down the runoff water, letting it filter into the soil rather than running down the slope. This infiltration is what allows the plants to grow.
These practices have transformed lives in the landlocked West African state, where 80% of people rely on farming.
I have a family of 11 people. At the moment, my store is full of grain I haven't touched. I also have plenty of beans. This is thanks to the technique of stone barriers, which we introduced.
An estimated 500,000 to 740,000 acres of barren land have been rehabilitated in this way, an area roughly the size of Luxembourg. But in a region threatened by the advancing Sahara, there is more to be done.
There are still many families who've not had the chance to change. They know and they want to adopt these practices, but they need the means. It doesn't take a lot, but the resources need to be directed to those who need them to implement these practices.
The success of sustainable farming is bringing food security to the impoverished former French colony. But it's also helping stop a rural exodus that's straining resources in urban centres. Instead of being lured by the city, a new generation of young villagers see their future on the land.
And now we take a look at some other stories that we picked especially for you from the world press in Media Watch with Daniel Ross. Daniel.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Encryption.
Encryption. David Cameron, Prime Minister of England, said one of the dumber things that's been said in recent history about the internet. In the wake of the terrorism in France, he made a speech saying that he wants to ban encryption. He actually said, and I quote, "In our country, do we want to allow a means of communication between people we cannot read?" Which anyone who's has any interest in privacy rights would say, well, yeah, of course we want that. But the economic side of it is crazy, actually, when you think about it, because e-trading, online shopping, banking, messaging, all of these things use encryption. It's not something you can just do away with. The example given in this Guardian article actually says, think about Apple, for example. Apple's not going to stop providing privacy just for the UK.
Right.
They'd probably prefer to stop selling products in the UK, which is what you can really expect from most companies around the world if the Prime Minister were to actually go forward with this silly, silly plan.
In other words, stick with your day job, so to speak, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Running the country or whatever.
That's why they're experts. Yeah, okay. Next.
Second, New York Magazine, Charlize Theron learned from the Sony hack that she made $10 million less than her co-star, Chris Hemsworth, who's younger, less experienced, newer to the scene. And by all rights, she should have been making more money if you're basing it on seniority, for example. But instead, they were basing it on gender, and she made $10 million less. So what she did was, when she found out, she went to Sony and said, please, can I have $10 million more? I just found out you paid me unfairly. To which they answered yes, and she got her $10 million.
Really? Go Charlie's.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's an extra point in the corner of people who say it's good to ask for a raise. the reality, people quote the.
I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, no, it's most of these surveys, most of the research says that one of the reasons, not all of the reasons, because there's discrimination, there's leave from work, there's a lot of reasons involved, but one of the major things is that people don't ask for raises, so they don't get them. In particular, because of work dynamics, women find themselves asking for less raises because they have less power, by and large, in workplaces because of patriarchy, etc., etc.
They don't go drink beers with the boss, and
exactly.
They don't talk sports.
The system, the social system, the hierarchy, it's all set up against that. One of the interesting things to note is people contend with the 77 cent mark. It's actually 9 cents is the difference, the gender pay gap.
Wow. Thanks very much, Dan Roth.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that's The Economy Magazine for today, your daily source for economic and financial reports at i24 News. I'm Binyamin Tjong-Alvares. Thanks for watching. Do join us again tomorrow for more.